Yes, Pete.
Carl, in a nutshell, what would you say to distinguish yourself from your opponent, Scott Peters?
I've been cleaning up his messes for about a decade. That's in a nutshell. And there's two things here. His votes on the city council and his votes in Congress have not been constructive or part of the solution. He's actually created problems. He is known as one of the fathers of pension reform. His actions led to our city losing our credit rating for 5 years and being accused and having to admit to securities fraud. The city of San Diego and Scott Peters had to go into a settlement with the SEC where they admitted securities fraud, issuing false and misleading financial statements. You know, Enron, that's kind of what they did. That's why we were called Enron by the Sea. Mr. Peters voted to cut police, fire, library hours, road repairs. The biggest cuts that he made were in the area of road repairs. I've never voted against those programs. In fact, I've always said, here's a plan on how we restore those programs. So I think the best way to sum up is in one line is that I have been cleaning up Scott Peters' mess for well over a decade, and I'm excited to get to Washington to clean up his mess and a lot of other messes that have been created. Yes, sir. Herb.
It's just a question, it's a comment.
Sure.
Why do you want to go there? Explain something to you.
Yeah.
I moved down here from Maryland. We would call the line from D.C. to Maryland to cross it. It's the logic-free zone. Dr. Mr. Spock from Star Trek would be the best president we've ever had. Why? He would say, this is illogical. And this is to you, this is anybody that goes there. You are automatically made a Democrat or Republican. You have no power whatsoever. You're bottom of the pile. When you get there, and your boss, Rainer, says, you're going to do what I tell you to do. You can't cross them. Look, there was congressmen that were gotten rid of because they crossed the line. Logic-free zone. I'm sorry about this, but I see this every day when I live there. And also, I'm an ex-federal employee. There are things that the federal government can do that businesses in a million years couldn't do. I did something in the Social Security that the best company on the planet ever couldn't accomplish. See?
Or let me respond to a couple of those things. I hear the frustration and I identify with it.
What's that?
I hear your frustration and I identify with it. And I think that you're right that that's our current system, where it's broken and people are towing party lines, that no one wants to speak truth to power. They're there to clock time. If I would put out another distinction between myself and Mr. Peters, he's not there to rock the boat. He claims to be an independent, but when you take a look at his voting record, on all the major pieces of legislation, he's always been lock, stock, in compliance with what Ms. Pelosi has demanded of him. I'm not there to fade into the woodwork. I'm not there to toe the party line. I'm there to make change happen. And some of that change has to occur by actually speaking up and challenging those in power.
Right.
Some of you recognize that Jerry Sanders endorsed me in the mayor's race last year. We've developed a warm friendship. But prior to that, it was not warm and fuzzy. I had, just like those City Hall project backers, come to me and say, you got to do this. And I said, no. I had Sanders and his team every once in a while say, you got to do this. And I say, no. And you know what? It could be political suicide, but I'd rather listen to my constituents who are sick and tired of members of Congress that go there, fade into the woodwork, give lip service to being independent and wanting to solve the problems, but nothing ever gets done. I'm there to get things done. Now, it could be suicide, but I think that the question for the public is going to be, do we elect more of the same? Or do we try something different, particularly when trying something different has a track record here in San Diego, 4 years on the council, of getting major change implemented, not by my efforts alone, but by working with the public, no matter what party they come from. Suspend the disbelief. That's a line that I used years ago. Give it a chance. Because otherwise we accept the same, we give in. We say politics will never be changed. The issues will never be solved. They will always toe the party line and the powerful elites will always control. Or we can say, I'm not going to accept that. I'm going to actually try. I'm actually going to support a candidate who's willing to go and say, I'm going to speak truth to power. 2 last questions and we wrap it up. Yes, sure.
So are you ready to endorse the candidate for mayor?
Candidate for mayor, am I ready? Yes, I did actually last week. I guess our press conference was not as much of a splash as we had hoped. I'm supporting Kevin Faulkner for San Diego mayor. And let me tell you why real quick. Kevin's always been in the trenches with me on all of our reform efforts. He's always been there quietly working, and I think that he's not been splashy about it, but he's been a steady workhorse. And again, people may say, well, I don't agree with everything Kevin has to offer. We probably don't agree with everything I have to offer, I get it. But Kevin's been sincere. Kevin's been consistent. And I would take someone who is sincere and consistent, even if I disagree with them on a couple issues, over someone who will bend to political pressure from special interests and try to walk into a room and size up, where do I think you want me to be? And let me shapeshift into what you want me to be for the moment. And then I'm going to walk down the hallway to another powerful group who completely disagrees with you. And I'm going to shapeshift into what they want me to be. A leader, and that may be politics, but that's why politics is broken. That's why politics is broken. I would take someone who I disagree with on some issues over someone who wants to blow smoke up my rear end because they just want me to feel good. I can deal with someone who disagrees because at least we can start and understand, okay, where do we agree? And let's work where we agree. And then maybe that builds trust for where we disagree. And over a period of time, that trust yields understanding and ultimately compromise. But you cannot work with someone who refuses to be consistent or genuine in the positions that they take because you have no idea how to work with them. In business, a lot of negotiation happens in business. And having sold my companies, it was the most important transaction and negotiation of my life. But one of the things we learned long ago is that in negotiation, the first step is the most important step, which is to come to, not agreement, but to appreciative understanding, where you appreciate the positions of the parties. You understand the position of the parties. Well, what if you don't even understand where you guys are? You don't know where the disagreements are. Well, you can't have a negotiation unless you know where the parties are coming from, what is the disagreement, what's driving the disagreement. Then you can have a fruitful negotiation. When you have a leader who refuses to take a principled stand on issues, you cannot have leadership and you cannot have any sort of progress with that individual. And I don't believe that San Diego can survive a mayor who acts that way. We will spend 6 years or 4 years or 3 years, however long of a term this person has, having cotton candy discussions rather than fruitful discussions that actually resolve problems. Yes, in the back.
So that the background is understood. It's Carl DeMaio.
Yes, ma'am.
Rosie Adams.
Hey, Rosie.
United States Navy, renovated and retired military officer.
Thank you for your service.
Commissioned and non-commissioned. And important point, actually have been a employment military officer and non-commissioned officer. It's employment, military registered employment. Got to be citizenship honorable. Have been a ship serviceman enlisted, so it's different. The use of the word service has been paramount. But anyway, important point, have a strong democracy Democrat voting record in the current democracy, citizen, nonpartisan. And important to know also, Mayor Bob Filner, citizen, democracy,
well, he's no longer mayor, thank goodness.
Military veteran, right, is innocent. And the scam is, and also have on record National Broadcasting Company employment. So actually believe in Chris Dodd and Chris Matthews and Ann Curry and many of the great.
So what's your question?
Actually got some comments talking about
okay.
what are the problems with just accountability of the criminal. Talked about the 3 issues of immigration and immigration. Right, criminal accountability. Right, citizens got to hold criminals accountable. Czech Schwarzeneggers and Bill Collinger's in the country of Austria How did Schwarzenegger and Bill Colander get into the United States? Wasn't by a passport, a legal passport, but a Visa credit card ain't gonna cut the mustard. So gotta have investigators and campaigners that want the actual truth of what occurred, all right? And Mayor Bob Hiller is still mayor of San Diego.
Okay. One last question, right back in the back table.
I'm so glad I got my chance to go 2 cents in. First of all, I'm a person with a lot of integrity, and that in itself creates a lot of roadblocks for myself. And because of that, I am very proud to say my husband and myself, who've been married over 40 years, have never voted party. We've always voted the person. We were very angry when you did not get elected mayor. It's like we were mad. Now, going back to something that was just a little bit ago, I just have to say something. I'm an educator in the South Bay, and I can tell you, I've been down there for years. I've had many, many, many students in my classroom who I know are not legal residents here. But they come across the border, they borrow somebody's address, but I am okay with that because I do believe to solve some of the problems in Mexico is to educate those people. So, you know, you sort of turn the blind eye, you look beyond that. But what I want to get is your comments on this. I have a really, really hard time with a couple of the issues that have come to fruition when it comes to giving illegal citizens driver's license and the right to vote. And I want to hear your take on that.
Someone who's not a citizen in this country should not have the right to vote. Citizenship comes with rights and responsibilities. The right to vote is probably the most precious right. And so I haven't seen any of those proposals, but I think that they would never, I don't even think the Constitution would allow them to happen. But we should not have non-citizens voting in our elections. That's just simply a basic right of citizenship, is that you should be the only ones voting and the outcomes of electing our leaders, plain and simple. One last question and then we'll go.
What's your opinion on the legalization of marijuana?
Legalization of marijuana. Well, in the state of California, medical marijuana is the law of the state, and that's not passed by the legislature. That's passed by the citizens of the state of California. And I lost my mother to terminal cancer. She had breast cancer that was misdiagnosed. After a 6.5-year really intense fight, she passed. It moved into her bones, which is incredibly painful. My father left 2 weeks before she died. My sister and myself were kind of saddled with more of the responsibilities of primary caregiving. And she used, I don't know if there's any doctors in the audience, but she used 2 drugs in combination called Dilaudid and Dolafine. Incredibly strong drugs, particularly when taken in combination. At times, those drugs were not sufficient for her. If she turned to me when I was age 13 or 14 and said, I need marijuana to navigate and manage my pain, you damn right I'd find every single way to get that for her. Californians agree with that position, that and it's very regulated, by the way. The California voter passed an initiative that is very specific. And right now, a lot of these pot shops are not complying with the law. The law said that anytime a primary care physician and a patient that they have direct responsibility for come to the agreement that medical marijuana may assist with managing disease or pain, that prescription can be provided, and that drugs may be cultivated as well as provided to that individual. There's also other protections in that initiative that require that no profit be made. No profit can be made on the provision of marijuana for these patients. I agree with that law because the voters have made it the law of the state of California. It's compassionate. I think it's commonsensical. The question is, how do you regulate it in a very enforced and strict manner? How do you make sure that the protections that voters put into that initiative are upheld? Right now, we have completely the Wild West on these pot shops. And so we have 2 extremes. There are some people who say, ignore the voter intent and mandate, and others that say, legalize all drugs, let's start with marijuana. I think in the middle is, let's start by implementing the voter-approved initiative in a very focused and accountable way. That's my position. On the city council, I held that position. As mayor, I would have provided a solution for that position. And as a member of Congress, I believe that that's what I'm going to represent in Congress, is that the federal government ought to allow California to implement the voter-approved statute, Proposition 215. Thank you very much for helping me out today, and I look forward to seeing